Remember the days when bands ruled the airwaves, but some just vanished? Today, we're diving into a list of 100 of the best gone groups of the 1960s. Bands that left their mark, but somehow slipped off the radar of time. You won't believe who made the cut at number 100. The Carpenters.
I see not a cloud eyes, and I won't be surprised if it's
Ever wonder what made the Carpenters so unforgettable in the late 60s? The Carpenters' heartfelt ballads, lush arrangements, and Karen Carpenter's angelic voice made them one of the most beloved acts of the late 60s.
stars fall down from the sky every time. Is the love that I've found ever since you've been around.
Their intimate, emotionally charged songs struck a chord with listeners, propelling them into the spotlight. With a string of enduring hits, the Carpenters' timeless appeal continues to charm fans around the world.
Love that I've found ever since you've been around. Close to you.
99. Free.
All right now, I know.
How did a band like Free manage to stay under the radar? Cited by Rolling Stone magazine as one of the pioneers of hard rock, Free were under the radar for much of their early career, until their blockbuster hit single, All Right Now. Formed in London in 1968, they spent the waning days of the 60s experimenting with different kinds of rock and roll and blues-inspired sounds. '98, The Incredible String Band. This band's influence reaches far beyond their peak years. The Incredible String Band were a prolific early progressive folk band whose various members mostly went on to successful music careers after the band's demise, but who remain a continuing influence on progressive music artists even today.
There's a whistle in the blues for you.
The band released a dozen albums beginning in 1967 and toured extensively to increasingly large crowds.
Back with you.
97, The Butterfield Blues Band. How did this band introduce the blues to rock audiences? One of the most influential blues acts of their time, the Paul Butterfield Blues Band, introduced a gritty and authentic brand of electric blues to a white rock audience.
On the sea.
The group would evolve into a sound more beholden to soul and contemporary R&B on 1968's In My Own Dream and 1969's Keep On Moving, though the strength of their instrumental attack and the sincerity of their vision remain unchanged.
Watch out, man.
96, The Ventures. What made the Ventures the prototype for guitar-based rock groups? The Ventures, an American musical group, gained fame with their instrumental interpretations of pop hits and served as a prototype for guitar-based rock groups. Formed in the Seattle, Washington area in 1958, the Ventures established their own label to market their recordings, and their efforts paid off in 1960 when the single Walk Don't Run became a hit. In 1964, the song was reworked with a more distinct surf sound and again was a success. 95. The Velvet Underground.
Don't know.
The Velvet Underground was an American rock band formed in 1964 in New York City by singer-guitarist Lou Reed, multi-instrumentalist John Cale, guitarist Sterling Morrison, and drummer Angus McLeese, replaced by Moe Tucker in 1965. Their debut album, The Velvet Underground and Nico, with German-born singer and model Nico, was released in 1967 to critical indifference and poor sales, but has become critically acclaimed. In 2003, Rolling Stone called it the most prophetic rock album ever made. '94. Spirit. How did this band achieve success with such a unique sound? Spirit was a highly regarded rock band that achieved modest commercial success, charting 11 albums in the US between 1968 and 1977. Spurred by the single Mechanical World, which had some regional success, the LP entered the Billboard chart in April and spent more than 6 months there, peaking in the top 40 in September. Peaking at number 25 in the Hot 100 in March 1969, it was the group's only top 40 single. The second album, The Family That Plays Together, followed in December 1968. With the hit single spurring sales, it peaked at number 22 in March 1969. 93. MC5. Can you believe this band's influence despite their limited popularity? MC5 was an American rock band formed in Lincoln Park, Michigan in 1963. The MC5's first album, Kick Out the Jams, 1969, a live recording named for the group's signature song, captures the loud, raw turbulence that characterized their powerful performances. 2 more albums followed, including the John Landau-produced Back in the USA 1970, before the band broke up in 1972. Louder and brasher than the other political bands of their era, the MC5 were extremely influential despite their limited popularity, and their sound can be heard in heavy metal, punk rock, and grunge. 92. The Beau Brummels. What did this band do to be mistaken for Brits? Often credited as early architects of the San Francisco sound, the Beau Brummels found success right out of the gate with their 1964 debut single, Laugh, Laugh. With its autumnal folk pop jangle and moody melodic hooks, the song bore enough resemblance to the burgeoning British invasion that many fans mistook these young Americans for Brits. 91. Steamhammer. How did this band leave a lasting impression with just one album? Steamhammer, among the most respected of all the British blues bands of the late 60s, released their debut album Reflection, 1969, which included Junior's Wailing, a track covered by Status Quo and a hit for Steamhammer in Germany, where the group was very popular. 90. Bee Gees. Did you know the Bee Gees' legacy started way before disco? The Bee Gees' sweet harmonies, infectious hooks, and impressive versatility made them a musical force to be reckoned with throughout the 60s. From their early ballads to their later foray into R&B and disco, their boundless talent and innovative songwriting cemented their status as pop icons. 89. The Electric Prunes. How did a psychedelic rock band stand out among its peers? The Electric Prunes played music on a darker, moodier, more introspective register than many of their California peers. Their compelling and slightly unsettling "I Had Too Much to Dream Last Night" is their most enduring 60s hit. 88. Country Joe and the Fish. After a brief period of performing as a folk duo under the name Country Joe and the Fish, Joe and Barry earnestly put together a rock band under the same name. The band's popularity was enhanced by the release of a second EP called The White EP, which contained 3 songs: Bass Strings, Section 43, and Thing Called Love. Bass Strings became one of the most popular songs played on the new up-and-coming radio format, then simply called Progressive Radio. 87. Big Brother and the Holding Company. What made this band so iconic, even without their legendary lead singer? One of the major bands in the San Francisco rock scene of the mid to late 60s, Big Brother and the Holding Company are best remembered as the group that introduced Janis Joplin to the world. However, the band existed before Joplin joined and moved forward after she departed, continuing to deliver their powerful fusion of hard rock, blues, and psychedelia. With Janis Joplin at the microphone, Big Brother and the Holding Company's profile soared, and after a misbegotten debut album for Mainstream Records, they scored a smash with their second LP, 1968's Cheap Thrills, which went to number 1 on the album charts and spawned the hit single Piece of My Heart. 86. Savoy Brown. Part of the late 1960s blues rock movement, Savoy Brown primarily achieved success in the United States, where they promoted their albums with non-stop touring. Founder, guitarist, and primary songwriter Kim Simmons was the sole constant member of the band from its formation in 1965 until his death in 2022. 85. The Mersey Beats. What's the story behind one of Liverpool's lesser-known success stories? The Mersey Beats are a Mersey beat band that emerged from the Liverpool scene in the early 1960s, performing at the Cavern Club along with the Beatles, Jerry and the Pacemakers, and other similar artists. 84. The Seeds. What did it take for the Seeds to carve their place in rock history? Best known for their rock and roll standard Pushin' Too Hard, the Seeds combine the raw, Stonesy appeal of garage rock with a fondness for ragged, trashy psychedelia. And though they never quite matched the commercial peak of their first 2 singles, Pushin' Too Hard and Can't Seem to Make You Mine, the band continued to record for the remainder of the 60s. None of their new musical directions resulted in another hit single, and the group disbanded at the turn of the decade. 83. Humble Pie. A showcase for former Small Faces frontman Steve Marriott and one-time Herd guitar virtuoso Peter Frampton, the hard rock outfit Humble Pie formed in Essex, England in 1969. Signed to the Immediate label, Humble Pie soon issued their debut single, Natural Born Boogie, which hit the British top 10 and paved the way for the group's premier LP, As Safe as Yesterday Is. Humble Pie grew even heavier for 1972's Smokin', their most successful album to date. However, while 1973's ambitious double studio live set, Eat It, fell just shy of the top 10, its 1974 follow-up, Thunderbox, failed to crack the top 40. After 1975's Street Rats reached only number 100 before disappearing from the charts, Humble Pie disbanded. 82. Keith Hartley Band. How did a band blend jazz and rock to create a unique sound? Together with Colosseum, the Keith Hartley Band of the late 60s forged jazz and rock music sympathetically to appeal to the UK progressive music scene. They released 5 albums, including Half-Breed and The Battle of Northwest 6. 81. The Grodes. The Grodes, sometimes known as the Tongues of Truth, were an American garage rock band from Tucson, Arizona that featured lead singer and songwriter Manny Frazier and were active between 1965 and 1967. They are best remembered for 2 Manny Frazier written songs, Cry a Little Longer, and the original version of Let's Talk About Girls, recorded as The Tongues of Truth, and later covered by the Chocolate Watch Band. 80. The Turtles. What made the Turtles such a beloved fixture of the 60s pop scene? Known for their catchy melodies, tight harmonies, and engaging stage presence, the Turtles were a beloved fixture of the 60s pop scene. Their extensive catalog ranged from charming folk pop tunes to groovy-laden rockers, showcasing their innate understanding of what made a song truly memorable. 79. Love. How did a racially diverse band break barriers in the 60s rock scene? California rockers Love were one of the first racially diverse bands in a very racially tense and divisive age. They gained fame with their third album, 1967's Forever Changes, which displayed their avant-garde and brazenly innovative philosophy. You've definitely heard their trippy, mind-bending 60s anthem, Alone Again, and if not, well, you are in for a strange little treat. 78. Fairport Convention. Did you know this band pioneered British folk rock? Fairport Convention started out influenced by American folk rock. They steered towards traditional British music for their next two albums, What We Did on Our Holidays and Unhalf-Bricking, both 1969. The latter featured fiddler Dave Swarbrick, and most notably on the song A Sailor's Life, which laid the groundwork for British folk rock by being the first time a traditional British song was combined with a rock beat. 77. The Music Machine. What set the Music Machine apart from other 60s bands? Fronted by chief songwriter and lead vocalist Sean Bonnewell, the band cultivated a characteristically dark and rebellious image reflected in an untamed musical approach. Sometimes it made use of distorted guitar lines and hallucinogenic organ parts, punctuated by Bonnewell's distinctively throaty vocals. Although they managed to attain national chart success only briefly with two singles, The Music Machine is today considered by many critics to be one of the groundbreaking acts of the 1960s. 76. The Frost. The group debuted in 1968 with the single Bad Girl, and upon signing to Vanguard, they issued their 1969 debut LP, Frost Music, scoring a regional smash with the single Mystery Man. Despite earning a cult following through the Midwest, the Frost failed to capture a national audience, and in the wake of 1970s Through the Eyes of Love, the group disbanded. 75. The Swinging Blue Jeans. What happened to this British band after their early success? The Swinging Blue Jeans was best known for their hit singles with the HMV label, Hippie Hippie Shake, Good Golly Miss Molly, and You're No Good, issued in 1964. Subsequent singles released that year and the next made no impression. In 1966, their version of Burt Bacharach and Hal David's Don't Make Me Over peaked at number 31 in the UK singles chart, but the group never charted again. 74. Question Mark and the Mysterians. Why are Question Mark and the Mysterians considered trailblazers in rock history? Question Mark and the Mysterians is best known for their song 96 Tears, a garage rock classic recorded in 1966 that reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. Having released 6 studio albums, the latest being 1999's well-received More Action, Question Mark and the Mysterians are also notable as perhaps the first Latino rock group to have a major hit. 73. The Charlatans. The Charlatans played a role in the development of the San Francisco Haight-Ashbury music scene during the 1960s. They are often cited by critics as being the first group to play in the style that became known as the San Francisco Sound. The band's recorded output was small. Following difficulties with various record labels, their only album, The Charlatans, was recorded and released by a reconstituted lineup with only 2 members of the original group in 1969. 72. Shocking Blue. Did you know this band's biggest hit was a worldwide sensation? Shocking Blue were a Dutch rock band from The Hague, Netherlands. Shocking Blue had two minor hit singles in 1969 with Long and Lonesome Road and Send Me a Postcard. The group scored a massive international smash that same year with their breakthrough song, Venus. With its incredibly bouncy and catchy guitar riff, urgent driving beat, and a powerhouse fiery vocal by stunning brunette beauty Verez, Venus peaked at number 1 on the US pop charts in February 1970 and sold over 1 million copies. Alas, it was the band's only major chart success in America. 71. Bloodwind Pig. A quirky detour of late 60s British progressive blues rock, Bloodwind Pig was founded by former Jethro Tull guitarist Mick Abrahams, who left Tull after the This Was album. On their 2 albums, they explored a jazz blues progressive style somewhat in the mold of, unsurprisingly, Jethro Tull, but with a lighter feel. They also bore some similarities to John Mayall's jazzy late 60s versions of the Blues Breakers, or perhaps Colosseum, but with more eclectic material. Both of their LPs made the British top 10, though the players' instrumental skills were handicapped by thin vocals and erratic material. 70. Gladys Knight and the Pips. What made this soulful group a staple of the 60s music scene? Gladys Knight and the Pips was best known for their string of hit singles on Motown's Soul record label and Buddha Records from 1967 to 1975, including I Heard It Through the Grapevine and Midnight Train to Georgia. The longest-lived incarnation of the act featured Gladys Knight on lead vocals with the Pips, who included her brother Merrill Bubba Knight and their cousins Edward Patton and William Guest as backup singers. Gladys Knight and the Pips are multiple Grammy and American Music Award winners and are inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and the Vocal Group Hall of Fame in 1996 and 2001, respectively. 69. The Mothers of Invention. The Mothers of Invention were led by composer, guitarist, singer, and bandleader Frank Zappa, a singular musical figure during a performing and recording career that lasted from the 1960s to the 90s. His disparate influences included doo-wop music and avant-garde classical music. Although the Mothers were called a rock and roll band for much of their years together, Zappa used them to create a hybrid style that bordered on jazz and complicated modern serious music. 68. The Tremeloes. When UK chart toppers Brian Poole and the Tremeloes parted company in 1966, few would have wagered that the backing group would outdo the lead singer. Remarkably, however, the relaunched Tremeloes went on to eclipse not only Poole, but the original hit-making act. Here Comes My Baby, a Cat Stevens composition, smashed into the top 20 on both sides of the Atlantic. An astute follow-up with Silence is Golden, previously the flip side of the Four Seasons Ragdoll, proved a perfect vehicle for the Tremeloes' soft harmonic style and gave them their only UK number 1 and their highest US chart entry at number 11. Having established themselves as a hit act, they notched up an impressive run of hits during the late 60s, including Even the Bad Times Are Good, Suddenly You Love Me, Hallula Hallula, and My Little Lady. 67. The Showstoppers. How did one hit make the Showstoppers a memorable act? The Showstoppers were an R&B act who had only one major hit record, but what a record it was. Ain't Nothing But a House Party was a particularly potent slice of Philly soul that made the charts in both the US and the UK and spawned memorable cover versions by the Contours, the Tremeloes, and the Jay Giles Band. Ain't Nothing But a House Party, BW What Can a Man Do, was an immediate success in the Philadelphia area. 66. The Sorrows. A British band of the 1960s, the Sorrows had a short run of success in the United Kingdom before they experienced another burst of fame in Italy. Though they only scored one major hit in the UK, Take a Heart, they would go on to enjoy a cult following that outstripped that of many of their contemporaries as their music retained a fresh approach. 65. Spanky and Our Gang. How did this band become known for their infectious, upbeat sound? Spanky and Our Gang is the debut album by Spanky and Our Gang, released on August 1, 1967. The album was released by Mercury Records and included 3 songs that were released as singles. These were Sunday Will Never Be the Same, their biggest hit, which reached number 9 in the US Billboard Hot 100 chart in the summer of 1967, Making Every Minute Count, which reached number 31, and Lazy Day, reaching number 14. Sunday Will Never Be the Same and Lazy Day both sold over 1 million copies. 64. West Coast Pop Art Experimental Band. Why was this band one of the most offbeat acts of the 60s? One of the more offbeat acts to emerge during the psychedelic era, the West Coast Pop Art Experimental Band were certainly eclectic and ambitious enough to live up to their slightly clumsy moniker. They were capable of jumping from graceful folk rock to wailing guitar freakouts to atonal, multi-layered, avant-garde compositions at a moment's notice, and earned a potent cult following for 1967's Volume 2 and 1968's Volume 3, A Child's Guide to Good and Evil. Their legacy also reflected a strongly divided creative mindset, with Bob Markley, the lyricist and ostensive leader of the group on one side, and the rest of the band on the other. 63. Strawberry Alarm Clock. How did a hit song define the legacy of this band? Strawberry Alarm Clock is a psychedelic rock band formed in 1967 with origins in Glendale, California, a city about 10 miles north of downtown Los Angeles. They are best known for their 1967 hit single, Incense and Peppermints. 62. The Dillards. While many fans first learned about the group from their regular appearances playing acoustically on The Andy Griffith Show, they were among the first traditional groups to electrify their sound and became an influence on artists like the Byrds, Eagles, and Elton John, with whom they later toured. Though widespread commercial success evaded them, their pioneering late 60s albums for Elektra, particularly Wheat Straw Sweet, received critical acclaim. The Dillards did place a single on the pop charts with 1971's It's About Time. 61. Juicy Lucy. Why did this band's blues rock sound make them stand out? Saucy blues rockers Juicy Lucy formed in 1969 and immediately notched a UK top 20 hit with their reading of the Bo Diddley perennial Who Do You Love, with their self-titled debut LP falling just shy of the top 40. 60. The Zombies. Why are the Zombies still celebrated as one of the greats? The Zombies are an English rock band formed in 1962. The group scored British and American hits in 1964 with She's Not There. In the US, 2 further singles, Tell Her No in 1965 and Time of the Season in 1968, were also successful. Their 1968 album Odyssey and Oracle is ranked number 100 on Rolling Stone's list of the 500 greatest albums of all time. The Zombies were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2019. 59. The Flying Burrito Brothers. Graham Parsons and Chris Hillman, former members of the Byrds, founded the Flying Burrito Brothers in Los Angeles in 1968, appropriating the name from a group of local musicians who gathered for jam sessions. The Burritos' first album, The Gilded Palace of Sin, 1969, also displayed Parsons' guiding hand. He contributed most of the songs and shaped its combination of classic country and western, punctuated by Kleinau's pedal steel guitar and hard-driving Southern California rock. Even after Parsons left the Burritos in 1970, replaced by Roberts, his songs continued to appear on the group's albums, including the live Last of the Red Hot Burritos, 1972, which also prominently featured bluegrass musicians. 58. The Jeff Beck Group. The first Jeff Beck Group was formed in the UK in 1967, consisting of Jeff Beck guitar, Rod Stewart vocals, Ron Wood bass, and Ainsley Dunbar drums. Sadly though, for a band that stayed together almost 3 years, their output is lacking. They were only to produce 3 ill-conceived UK singles and 2 LPs. There are, however, dozens of early recordings produced at Delane Leah Studios in 1967 and 1968, specifically for various BBC radio shows, including Saturday Club, Top Gear, and The Simmons Show. Although bootlegged in very poor quality, these have never been officially released. 57. New Vaudeville Band. How did this group create one of the quirkiest hits of the 60s? One of the oddest one-hit wonders of the 60s, the New Vaudeville Band, true to their name, drew from the swinging vaudeville, traditional jazz, and British music hall styles of the 20s and 30s to create a distinctively anachronistic band of novelty pop. The group was masterminded by producer-songwriter Jeff Stevens, who in 1966 convened a group of mostly anonymous studio musicians, including drummer Henry Harrison, to record a jaunty, old-timey British number he'd written called Winchester Cathedral. Winchester Cathedral was an enormous hit, climbing into the British top 5 and going all the way to number 1 in America, where it also won a Grammy. 56. The Four Pennies. The band found their greatest success with ballads like Juliet, which knocked the Searchers from the top of the charts in the spring of 1964. The song was originally labeled as the B-side of the group's second single, but was soon given A status when it started attracting attention over its flip side, Tell Me Girl. At this point, the band had already charted with their debut single, Do You Want Me To, but failed to make any waves with their music until Juliet appeared on the scene. The band's third single, a 3-hanky ballad called I Found Out the Hard Way, wasn't as successful as Juliet, but it did climb nicely into the top 20 in Great Britain. The Four Pennies charted twice more with Until It's Time for You to Go, a Buffy St. Marie number, and Black Girl from the great bluesman Leadbelly. 55. The Avons. How did a high school doo-wop group make a lasting impression? A talented doo-wop group from Englewood, New Jersey that formed in high school in 1954. The quintet woodshedded until confident enough to perform local gigs. By 1955, they were the hottest group in the area. Unfortunately, the Avons never achieved the success but managed to carve a spot in doo-wop heaven with the recordings Our Love Will Never Die, 1956, Baby, 1957, and You're So Close to Me, 1958. 54. The Move. The Move were one of the leading British rock bands of the 1960s. They scored 9 top 20 UK singles in 5 years, but were among the most popular British bands not to find any real success in the United States. The group's first 4 singles, Night of Fear, I Can Hear the Grass Grow, Flowers in the Rain, and Fire Brigade, all made the British top 10 in 1967 and 1968. 53. The Fabulous Wailers. What early success put the Fabulous Wailers on the map? The Wailers, often known as the Fabulous Wailers, were signed with Golden Crest and released a number of singles and an album under the label in 1959 and 1960. Tall Cool One was one of those releases, and it was a hit. The song landed the Tacoma Boys a promotional appearance on Dick Clark's American Bandstand in Philadelphia. 52. Moving Sidewalks. How did Moving Sidewalks leave a mark despite their brief existence? Moving Sidewalks released several singles and an album. Their single, 99th Floor, was well received and topped the charts at number 1 in Houston for 6 weeks. The success of this record led them to sign with Wand Records, which then released Need Me, also a top 10 hit for the band. The group was asked to open for many rock tours, including Jimi Hendrix and The Doors. 51. The Chocolate Watch Band. The Chocolate Watch Band was signed to Tower Records in 1966 and released their first single, Sweet Young Thing, in 1967. Later in the year, the band released their debut album, No Way Out. Although the album did not chart nationally, the band had a huge following in San Jose and the San Francisco Bay Area. In 1968, their second album, The Inner Mystique, was released and included the band's most popular song, a cover version of I'm Not Like Everybody Else. The Chocolate Watch Band officially broke up in 1970 with no intent of ever reuniting again. However, they reunited in 1999. 50. The Mindbenders. How did the Mindbenders help shape the British invasion sound? The Mindbenders were a 1960s beat group from Manchester, England. The band was one of the UK acts that were successful in the mid-1960s British invasion of the US charts, with their chart toppers Game of Love in 1965 and A Groovy Kind of Love in 1966. 49. The Holy Modal Rounders. Why did this cult act stand out in the folk scene? The Holy Modal Rounders were almost the very definition of a cult act. Their audience was small because their music was too strange, idiosyncratic, and at times downright dissonant for mainstream listeners to abide. What makes the Rounders unusual in this regard is that they owed primary allegiance to the world of acoustic folk, not one that generates many difficult, arty, and abrasive performers. 48. Captain Beefheart and his Magic Band. How did Captain Beefheart's avant-garde sound shape rock music? Captain Beefheart and his Magic Band was an American band who created music that has occasionally been dubbed avant-garde blues. Captain Beefheart and the Magic Band signed to A&M and released two 1966 singles, a version of Bo Diddley's Diddy Wah Diddy, followed by Moonchild, which was written by David Gates. Both were hits in Los Angeles. 47. The Kay Sisters. Formed in 1954 by Carmen Kay and originally known as the Three Ks, their big break came when they appeared on television's In Town Tonight in 1956. They followed this with 2 weeks of the London Palladium, and then their debut single, a cover version of the Charms' Ivory Tower on HMV Records, made the UK Top 20. They joined Philips Records in 1957, and their first two top 10 hits, which came in the company of Frankie Vaughan, were cover versions of Bob Jackson's Gotta Have Something in the Bank, Frank, and the Fleetwood's Come Softly to Me. Of the many singles they released, their only solo top 10 hit was their version of Anita Bryant's US hit, Paper Roses, in 1960. 46. The Family Dog. The Family Dog were formed in 1966 by producers, songwriters, and vocalists Steve Rowland and Albert Hammond. The debut album, A Way of Life, appeared in 1969 and was dominated by artful cover interpretations. In 1970, the group's name changed to Steve Rowland and the Family Dog, and they scored a hit in the Netherlands with the song Sympathy. A final minor hit, 1976 Uptown Uptempo Woman, proved to be the group's last gasp. 45. Ohio Express. How did this bubblegum pop band become a hit machine? The best-known songs of Ohio Express, an American bubblegum pop band, including their best-scoring single, Yummy Yummy Yummy, were actually the work of an assemblage of studio musicians working out of New York, including singer-songwriter Joey Levine. Several other Ohio Express hits were the work of other unrelated musical groups, including The Rare Breed and an early incarnation of 10cc. 44. The Shadows of Night. How did this band bring swagger to the Chicago music scene? The Shadows of Night were at once one of the most popular and among the toughest acts on the Windy City's teen scene. They were also one of the few who achieved genuine stardom nationwide. They released their first single, a cover of Van Morrison's Gloria that captured the swagger of Them's original recording while slightly bowdlerizing the lyrics. Gloria became a top 10 smash, and while their second release, Oh Yeah, didn't fare as well, it still cracked the top 40 and made the Shadows of Night Chicago's biggest band of the day. 43. Stone Ponies. What did Linda Ronstadt bring to this folk rock trio? Stone Ponies were a folk rock trio formed in Los Angeles, consisting of Linda Ronstadt on vocals, Bobby Kimmel on rhythm guitar and vocals, and Kenny Edwards on lead guitar. The Stone Ponies performed material mostly written together by Edwards and Kimmel, bolstered by Ronstadt's strident vocals and their strong three-part harmonies. Their recordings include Ronstadt's first hit song, a cover of Mike Nesmith's Different Drum. 42. The Knickerbockers. How did a garage rock group find a hit with a Beatles-esque sound? The Knickerbockers were a 60s garage rock group from Bergenfield, New Jersey that formed in 1962. They scored their only smash hit with the punchy and exciting Lies, which peaked at number 20 on the Billboard pop charts in early 1966. Their follow-up singles, One Track Mind and High on Love, were only modest successes. 41. The Bobby Fuller Four. What could have been for the Bobby Fuller Four if not for tragedy? Led by guitarist Bobby Fuller, with brother Randy on bass and a rotating lineup filling the remaining two spots, the Bobby Fuller Four might have enjoyed greater celebration were it not for the tragic and mysterious death of Bobby himself at just 23 years old. Pitched somewhere between the rich arrangements of the Beach Boys and the stripped-back rockabilly of Buddy Holly, the band only released 2 albums in '65 and '66. Their biggest hit, a cover of the Crickets' I Fought the Law, is an extraordinarily visceral slice of rough-edged 60s pop. 40. Sha Na Na. How did Sha Na Na go from Woodstock to a hit TV show? Performing a song and dance repertoire based on 1950s hit songs, Sha Na Na has been simultaneously reviving and parodying the music of the 1950s New York street culture since the group's formation in 1969. After gaining initial notoriety for their performance at Woodstock, the group hosted the Sha Na Na syndicated variety series that ran from 1977 to 1981. Billing themselves as From the Streets of New York, members were frequently outfitted in gold lame or leather jackets and sported pompadour or ducktail hairdos. 39. The Spencer Davis Group. His ferocious, soul-drenched vocals belying his tender teenage years, Stevie Winwood powered the Spencer Davis Group's 3 biggest U.S. hits during their brief lifespan as one of the British Invasion's most convincing R&B-based combos. The quartet got their first hit, the blistering Keep On Running, from another of Blackwell's acts, West Indian performer Jackie Edwards. After topping the British charts in 1965, the song struggled on the lower reaches of the US Hot 100. The group's 2 hottest sellers were self-penned projects. Gimme Some Lovin' and I'm a Man were searing showcases for the adolescent Winwood's gritty vocals and blazing keyboards, as well as the band's pounding rhythms. 38. The Merseys. How did the Merseys offshoot single become a hit sensation? A British pop group who had a career-defining smash hit with the 1966 single Sorrow. The Merseys were an offshoot of the successful Liverpool combo, the Mersey Beats. 37. Johnny Johnson and the Bandwagon. This popular soul group consisted of 4 former solo singers who decided to pool their resources. They had a hit with their debut UK release when Breaking Down the Walls of Heartache reached number 4 in October 1968. This pulsating dance song was the quartet's biggest hit, but 2 years later, they enjoyed further success with Tony McCauley's Sweet Inspiration and Blame It on the Pony Express, both of which reached the UK top 10. 36. Los Indios Tabajaras. Certainly the most uncommon duo of Brazilian artists to have a solid international career, Los Indios Tabajaras, was formed by the brothers Antenor Moreira Lima, Musapere, and Natalicio Moreira Lima, Irundi. In the US, they had success in the early 70s with Sakura Sakura, and their biggest hit was the foxtrot Maria Elena, which won second place at the American charts and sold over 1.5 million copies. Their 48 LPs also sold millions of copies worldwide, and they toured South, Central, and North America, Asia, and Europe before settling in the US. 35. The Creation. What set The Creation apart in the British rock scene? The Creation were an English rock band formed in 1966. Their best known songs are Making Time, which was one of the first rock songs to feature a guitar played with a bow, and Painter Man, which made the top 40 in the UK singles chart in late 1966 and reached number 8 in the German chart in April 1967. It was later covered by Boney M in 1979 and reached the number 10 position in the UK chart. Making Time was used in the movie Rushmore. Creation biographer Sean Egan defined their style as a unique hybrid of pop, rock, psychedelia, and the avant-garde. 34. The Easy Beats. How did the Easy Beats dominate the Australian rock scene? In Australia, they were the reigning kings of rock and roll from the summer of 1965 onward, assembling a string of 8 top 10 chart hits in a year and a half, including an EP that managed the unusual feat of making the singles chart. Their second album, It's Too Easy, was a match for their first, a genuinely exciting collection of British invasion-style rock and roll whose only fault, assuming that this was a fault, was that it seemed a year out of date in style when it was released in 1966. 33. The Syndicate of Sound. Through their national hit Little Girl, the band developed a raw sound and became forerunners in the psychedelic rock genre. The band's follow-up song, Rumors, didn't do very well, however, and they recorded several more singles that didn't do well either. Band member John Duckworth was drafted into the Army in 1970, and the group broke up. 32. The Herd. What made The Herd one of the loudest acts in Texas? Within a year of their formation, the band gained a reputation as one of the loudest musical acts in Texas, soon receiving a string of gigs at Houston's Catacomb Club. In 1967, The Herd recorded the Exit 9 single, an enduring piece in the musical genre of psychedelic rock. The band's blend of frantic melodies and studio techniques unique to most garage groups has brought praise to Exit 9 and its B-side cover version of You're Gonna Miss Me. 31. The Monks. Where to start with the Monks? They recorded only a single album, 1966's Black Monk Time, but what a record it is! Their backstory is about as unlikely as you can get. American GIs stationed in Germany adopt tonsured haircuts and play experimental punk music a decade before the term was invented. 30. The Scaffold. What made the Scaffold's catchy hits stick in your head? The Scaffold's biggest successes were their cheerfully silly singles, starting with Thank You Very Much and continuing with Lily the Pink, a sterilized adaptation of an old rugby song featuring Jack Bruce on bass, and the somewhat incomprehensible Gingan Ghoulie, all of which had a knack for sticking in the mind on endless repeat without causing undue annoyance. These 3 songs in particular are well remembered even as the 1990s draw to a close. In 1973, the Scaffold officially ceased to exist. 29. Moby Grape. Why is Moby Grape's eclectic sound still celebrated? Although they are most often identified with the psychedelic scene, their specialty was combining all sorts of roots music, folk, blues, country, and classic rock and roll. Moby Grape remains their signature statement, though the folk rock and country rock worked better than the boogies. Omaha, Sittin' by the Window, Changes, and Lazy Me are some of their best songs. Although subsequent albums had more good moments than many listeners are aware of, a combination of personal problems and bad management effectively killed off the group by the end of the 1960s. 28. Family. What did Family bring to the progressive rock scene of the 60s? The band signed with the Reprise Records label, the first UK band signed directly to UK and US Reprise, and their debut album, Music in a Doll's House, was recorded during early 1968. Music in a Doll's House charted at number 35 in the UK to critical acclaim. 27. Blues Magoos. A Bronx-based quintet, the Blues Magoos were formed in 1964 and were originally known as the Trenchcoats before changing their name to the Blues Magoos and then subsequently adopting the more conventional spelling as they became fixtures on the Greenwich Village club scene. After an intense makeover and a marketing blitz, they emerged as sort of an East Coast answer to the then emerging San Francisco flower power psychedelic scene with a big single, We Ain't Got Nothing Yet, that same year, and attracted further attention with the album Psychedelic Lollipop, which also charted. By 1972, the Blues Magoos name was retired. 26. The Pebbles. How did this band create a lasting legacy with surf rock? The Pebbles were another great Californian band from the 60s. They were influenced by the surf rock and garage rock sounds of the time and released their classic albums Beach Beat and Turn On in the mid-1960s. The Pebbles were also known for their energetic and wild live shows, which helped to create their cult following. 25. Soft Machine. What made Soft Machine pioneers in the jazz rock genre? Canterbury rockers Soft Machine formed in 1966 and became one of Britain's first bona fide psychedelic groups. Their eclectic sound incorporated flutes, keyboard, and a saxophone for an underground, acquired taste kind of sound, which modern critics often refer to as jazz rock. 24. The Grassroots. The Grassroots frequently hit the Billboard charts until the early 70s. Their music has stood the test of time by appearing in numerous soundtracks and films since their heyday. The Grassroots maintain a nationwide touring schedule at casinos and resorts as the headlining act due to the durability of their many charting rock and roll songs. 23. Freddie and the Dreamers. What made Freddie and the Dreamers known for their energetic stage antics? Freddie and the Dreamers were an English beat band that had a number of hit records between 1962 and 65. The band's stage act was enlivened by the comic antics of Freddie Garrity, who would bounce around the stage with arms and legs flying. They hit the charts in the US for the first time in 1965 with I'm Telling You Now. They had another hit with Do the Freddie, named after the manic moves of Garrity during their performances. The original group was disbanded in 1969 and reformed in 1976, touring for the next 25 years. 22. Goldie and the Gingerbreads. Why is Goldie and the Gingerbreads' legacy so significant? A legend among fans of 1960s garage rock and R&B, Goldie and the Gingerbreads were the first all-female rock band to sign with a major label and earned praise in the United States, the United Kingdom, and Europe, though they never scored the hit record they deserved. They released a string of singles without getting a chance to make an album, but in 2021, most of those 45s comprised a definitive career overview, Thinking About the Good Times, complete recordings 1964 to 1966. 21. The Sonics. Proto-punk pioneers the Sonics are arguably the best known name on their list, though still criminally underexposed. Formed in Tacoma, Washington, the Sonics released 3 albums in the 60s and are still touring today, albeit with only one original member, Rob Lind, whose growling sax remains a key element of their sound. Their 65 debut album, Here Are the Sonics, is a swaggering, screaming masterpiece. Listen to the Shambling Rockers, Dirty Robber, and Psycho for a good introduction to their music, which fuses loose-limbed rockabilly with elements of soul and R&B. 20. Sergio Mendes and Brazil 66. How did this Brazilian band take American pop music by storm? Sergio Mendes and Brazil 66 recorded 2 albums between 1966 and 1968, including the best-selling Look Around LP, before a major personnel change for its 4th album, Fool on the Hill. 19. The Great Society. What role did Grace Slick play in the Great Society's rise? Before joining Jefferson Airplane, Grace Slick sang lead and played various instruments for the Great Society, who were nearly as popular as Jefferson Airplane in the early days of the San Francisco psychedelic scene. The Great Society broke up in late 1966 after recording only 1 locally released single. After Jefferson Airplane became stars, Columbia issued a couple of live albums of the Great Society, performing at San Francisco's Matrix Club in 1966. 18. Pretty Things. What set the Pretty Things apart in the British rock scene? Pretty Things were an English rock band formed in September 1963 in Sidcup, Kent, taking their name from Bo Diddley's 1955 song Pretty Thing, and active in their first incarnation until 1971. They released 5 studio albums, including the debut The Pretty Things, UK album chart number 6, and SF Sorrow, being the first rock opera, 4 EPs and 15 UK singles, including the top 20 UK singles chart Don't Bring Me Down and Honey I Need. They reformed later in 1971 and continued through to 1976, issuing 3 more studio albums, and reformed once again from 79 to 2020, releasing another 5 studio albums, finalizing with Bare as Bone, Bright as Blood. 17. Colosseum. Why was Colosseum so influential in the British prog rock scene? One of the most influential of the early British progressive rock bands, Colosseum fused an adventurous approach to rock with strong jazz and blues influences and classical keyboard accents. They earned a loyal and lasting following, though they never scored a major breakthrough hit. Fontana Records signed the band, and their first album, Those Who Are About to Die Salute You, was released in 1969. It fared well in the charts, and the lead-off track, Walking in the Park, was issued as a single, though it proved to be the only 7-inch from the group. 16. Count 5. Why is Psychotic Reaction still a defining song of the 60s? Strictly speaking, based on their raw talent, the Count 5 wouldn't rate too much attention from music historians. The definitive one-hit wonders, they failed to make much of a lasting impression on the listening public or on music. But just play that one hit, Psychotic Reaction, even 40 years after the fact, and almost any audience will brighten up and want to hear more. Their one fault was that they could never generate more. They tried but never issued another record half as good. 15. The Nice. What made The Nice a hidden gem of the prog rock world? Underrated but outrageously talented British prog rock band The Nice were a lower-key sibling of bands like Pink Floyd and Grateful Dead. While they never reached the enduring levels of fame of their prog rock peers, their use of classical and jazz components shaped the experimental directions that prog would so successfully dabble with in the 15 years that followed. 14. Sir Douglas Quintet. Why is Sir Douglas Quintet considered a Texas music legend? Arguably the greatest and most influential Tex-Mex group ever, the Sir Douglas Quintet epitomized Texas's reputation as a fertile roots music melting pot and established the career of Tex-Mex cult legend Doug Sahm. Although they went largely underappreciated during their existence, mostly in the 60s, their influence was far-reaching and continues to be felt in Texas and beyond. 13. Zachary Thax. How did a teenage band create some of the best garage rock? One of the best garage bands of the 60s and one of the best teenage rock groups of all time, Zachary Thax released a half-dozen regionally distributed singles in 1966 and 1967. Some were hits in their hometown of Corpus Christi, Texas, but none were heard elsewhere until they became renowned among 60s collectors. Most importantly, they were first-rate songwriters with the breakneck Bad Girl, Won't Come Back, the smoking Face to Face, Can't You Hear Your Daddy's Footsteps, and the folk rock Mersey Beat hybrid Please, ranking among the top echelon of American 60s garage rock. 12. The Dartels. They broke into the Pop 20 their first time out with Hot Pastrami, 1963, a reworking of Nat Kendrick's and the Swans' Mashed Potatoes. An album titled after the song was hastily thrown together, and the band briefly basked in its newfound success, which included a television appearance on the Munsters. The Dot deal was weird. Their follow-up and only other recording to make the Pop 100, Dance Everybody Dance, was at number 99. 11. The Standells. What was the Standells' lasting impact on punk and garage rock? The Standells were a band from Los Angeles in the 60s, and they had a unique sound that blended 60s garage rock with punk and psychedelia. They released a number of classic albums during their career, including Dirty Water, Try It, and Sometimes Good Guys Don't Wear White. The Standells had a big impact on later punk and alternative bands, and their music is still heard today. 10. The Chiffons. What made the Chiffons one of the premier girl groups of the 60s? The Chiffons, a premier all-female American group, was formed in 1960 by three Bronx, New York-born teenage girls. Their first hit, Tonight's the Night, peaked at number 76 on the R&B chart in 1960. The Chiffons became a quartet in 1963. Their first single after she joined the group was He's So Fine, which peaked at number 1 on the R&B chart and sold more than 1 million copies. 9. John Mayall and the Blues Breakers. John Mayall and the Blues Breakers were an English blues rock band led by multi-instrumentalist, singer, and songwriter John Mayall. The band has been influential as an incubator for British rock and blues musicians. Among those with a tenure in the Blues Breakers are guitarists Eric Clapton, later of Cream, Blind Faith, Derek and the Dominoes, and a successful solo career, Peter Green, later of Fleetwood Mac, and Mick Taylor, later of the Rolling Stones, bassist John McVie, later of Fleetwood Mac, Jack Bruce, later of Cream, and Tony Reeves, later of Colosseum, drummers Huey Flint, Ainsley Dunbar, later of Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention, Journey, and Jefferson Starship, Mick Fleetwood, later of Fleetwood Mac, and John Heisman, later of Colosseum, and numerous others. 8. Blue Cheer. What makes Blue Cheer's sound the loudest and most influential of its era? The hard rock group Blue Cheer were often referred to as being louder than God, and no band of their era more richly earned that title. Often cited as the first heavy metal band, they were inarguably heavy on albums like 1968's Vince Bus Eruptum and Outside Inside, playing raw blues-based rock with a bludgeoning impact and monolithic guitar sound that inspired hundreds of bands to turn up their amps and summon mountains of noise. The group embraced a more polished approach on 1969's conventionally bluesy Blue Cheer and 1971's folk-infused Oh Pleasant Hope. But after reuniting on 1985's The Beast Is Back, they returned to their roots in proto-metal hard rock, a path they would follow for the rest of their career, which ended with 2007's What Doesn't Kill You. 7. Quicksilver Messenger Service. The band that became Quicksilver Messenger Service originally was conceived as a rock vehicle for folk singer-songwriter Dino Valente. They debuted at the end of 1965 and played around the Bay Area and then the West Coast for the next 2 years, building up a large following but resisting offers to record that had been taken up by such San Francisco acid rock colleagues as Jefferson Airplane and the Grateful Dead. Quicksilver finally signed to Capitol toward the end of 1967 and recorded their self-titled debut album in 1968. Happy Trails, the 1969 follow-up, was recorded live. 6. The Atlantics. What made the Atlantics Australia's most successful surf band? The Atlantics are an Australian surf band founded in 1961. The band's claim to fame was as Australia's most successful of the genre. Most well known for their classic hit, Bombora, their later recordings such as Come On are examples of 1960s garage rock. They were the first Australian rock band to write their own hits. 5. 13th Floor Elevators. How did 13th Floor Elevators shape the sound of psychedelic rock? Best band name ever, am I right? These early psychedelic innovators might not be a household name these days, but they had an outsized impact on the growth of prog and trippy rock during the heady days of the counterculture. 4. The Champs. How did a Latin-tinged instrumental become an international sensation? The Champs are an American rock and roll band most famous for their Latin-tinged 1958 instrumental single, Tequila. The group took their name from that of Gene Autry's horse Champion and was formed by studio executives at Autry's Challenge Records to record a B-side for the Dave Burgess single Train to Nowhere. 3. Kaleidoscope. What set Kaleidoscope apart as one of the most eclectic bands of the 60s? Kaleidoscope were arguably the most eclectic band of the psychedelic era, weaving together folk, blues, Middle Eastern, and acid more often and more seamlessly than any other musicians. With the exception of their mawkish forays into old-timey music, Kaleidoscope's work holds up well. Their first 3 albums were their best, highlighted by the lengthy tracks Taxum and 7/8 Suite, which are groundbreaking fusions of Middle Eastern music and rock. Hit singles were a difficult proposition for such a versatile group to come to grips with, although several of their 45s were pretty good. One of the best, Nobody, was a most unusual fusion of R&B and psychedelia that found the group backing veteran rock and blues greats Larry Williams and Johnny Guitar Watson. 2. Dave D, Dozy, Breaky, Mick and Titch. How did this quintet become one of UK's top pop bands? Hook-laden tunes transformed Salisbury, Wiltshire, England-based quintet Dave D, Dozy, Breaky, Mick and Titch into one of the United Kingdom's top pop bands of the mid-60s. Performing songs by their managers Ken Howard and Alan Blakely, the group scored with such top 10 UK hits as Hold Tight, Hideaway, Bend It, Save Me, OK, Zabadak, Last Night in Soho, and the chart topper Legend of Xanadu. The group disbanded in 1969. 1. The Jackson 5. What made the Jackson 5 the breakout stars of the late 60s? The Jackson 5, stylized as the Jackson 5, later known as the Jacksons, were an American pop band composed of members of the Jackson family. In 1968, signed with Motown, where they achieved 16 top 40 singles on the Hot 100. The group left Motown for Epic Records in 1975, with the exception of Jermaine, who was replaced by Randy. At Epic, they released 5 albums between 1976 and 1981, including the successful albums Destiny, 1978, and Triumph, 1980, and the singles Enjoy Yourself, Shake Your Body Down to the Ground, and Can You Feel It? The brothers also released solo albums, most successfully Michael, whose 1982 album Thriller became the best-selling album in history. So there you have it, the top 100 gone but not forgotten groups of the 1960s. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more musical throwbacks. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time on another deep dive into music history.